What we're going to be doing today is working with this Honda 125 engine here. Today we're going to take it down as far as it can go and remove everything that can be removed. I will explain all the common issues you can have, and the tools you will need will all be in the description. I already gave this guy a good wash in the parts washer, thus the plastic bags on the engine to cover up some of the holes. You want to give it a good wash just so you don't have to deal with the dirt when you're taking it apart. To start off, we're going to remove the head and also the cylinder. So we're going to remove the 5 10mm bolts on top of the head. After you removed all the nuts holding the head on, then you can begin to remove the 4 nuts holding the cylinder onto the bottom end. To get to your 4th cylinder bolt, you'll have to open the power valve assembly and remove it with a wrench. These bolts are known to be on there pretty good, so what you want to do is take the open end of a wrench and the box end and combine them, and it'll allow you to get more leverage to break the nut. Now you want to remove the linkage that connects the power valve assembly to the bottom end. Later on I'm going to remove the rest of this linkage because I'm going to send in the cylinder to get replated. After you hit it with a mallet, and if your threads are pretty rusty here, put some PB Blaster on it, let it sit for a bit, and then hit it again with a little rubber mallet. Not too hard, just tap it. You should be able to break it off of here. There it goes. If your cylinder head was a little tough to take off like mine was, it's not a bad idea to replace the bolts here. They can get pretty rusted. Now we can remove our cylinder. And this cylinder looks pretty good. You can still see the cross hatching in the cylinder, so that's a good sign it doesn't have excessive wear. Now you can take a pair of needle nose pliers and remove your circlip. Be careful not to damage the piston if you're planning to reuse it. You can remove your wrist pin. If it's stuck in there, just take a socket and push it out from the other side. You won't want to drop your piston like I did if you're planning to reuse it. There's a little scoring on one side of this piston, but overall it looks good. I'm planning to replace it though with a new Vertex piston. And this is pretty interesting because it's a single ring piston. Now we're going to remove our clutch side engine case. And then we can begin to remove our clutch assembly by taking out the bolts and springs holding on the pressure plate. Now we can remove our clutch pressure plate, and some of the clutch plates also came out with it. Now we can just slide out our clutch push rod. And then now we're going to bend back the tabs to be able to take this nut holding on the rest of the clutch assembly. You want to just wedge your screwdriver in and bend it backwards, and then you might want to use a hammer as well to push it down all the way so you're able to fit a socket over the nut. Now that I got both those tabs bent back, I can remove the bolt holding on the inner and outer clutch baskets. You can use a clutch holder tool, or I hold it with a towel, and that usually works. Also, don't lose track of your washers because they can stick to the larger metal parts. Now we're going to remove the coolant pump from our clutch side inner casing. Now removing all the bolts holding on our inner casing. When removing your clutch side inner casing, be careful not to lose your kickstart assembly because it'll come off in pieces. After you've removed the bolts holding on your shifting assembly, you could pull out your shift shaft and then your shifting guide. There will be springs on your shifting guide, and you don't want to lose those. And now you can remove the top part of your shifting drum. As you're removing your gears here, make sure that you're not leaving any washers because they tend to stick to the case. After you've removed all the gears from your clutch side, then you can head over to your stator side and remove the cover. I had already removed this flywheel a while back, but how I did it is I took this gear puller, and the flywheels on these 125s are so small that I just put it around it and tightened it down, and I'll put this in the description. Now we can remove our stator assembly. Normally there's 2 bolts. In this case there's 1. I had already removed 1 on a previous project. And then you can just pull the rubber tab out, and that'll allow you to release the stator assembly. I've always thought it's kind of weird that rubber holds the metal crankcase together on the side. Now I'm going to remove these 3 bolts here to get the case ready to split. I'm also going to slip out the arm that connects to your clutch cable. Now that I got all the parts removed, I'm ready to look around the engine and removed all the remaining bolts so I can split the cases and get to the transmission and crank. Before you split the cases, you really want to make sure you have all the bolts removed because it can cause serious damage to the engine if you don't and then try and split the cases. So make sure to check 2 to 3 times. Alright, now that you got the engine, all the bolts removed from the engine, we can line up our case splitter. We want it even on both sides, and then we'll begin to put some tension on it and then bang on a couple of these pivot points here just to help loosen them up with a little pressure on them, and then we're going to give it some more pressure here. I use the Tusk case splitter. It's the most common one I see, but I'll put it down in the description of everything else. Just continue to tighten it down. Make sure as you go that the case is splitting evenly. Sometimes one side likes to go higher than the other, so you want to take a mallet to the side that's lower and try and even them out. Okay, so when we split the cases, this part of the assembly came out on this side. Unfortunately, this part of the transmission stayed on this side because this bearing was locked up. But an easy way to fix this is to hit it with a mallet. So what I did is I threaded in one of the rods from the case splitter, and I'm gonna drive it out with this mallet. I threaded a rod in just so it would be more of a direct blow, and I could drive it all the way through. You want to put a hand over this end so you don't lose track of your washers. And as you can see, we were able to drive this guy out of here. Alright, now that you have your transmission assembly completely removed, you can check your gears and make sure they all look okay. I also zip tied them so I don't lose track of where they go. Here's I installed the case splitter, and I'm going to use it to push out our crankshaft from this side. So you just install it on the other side now, the opposite side that you used to split the cases, and make sure it's flush and everything. And then you'll just tighten it down. It should push out our crankshaft. And now we can just pull our crankshaft out of the crankcase. Now we got to remove the seals from the engine. Alright, now that we got our seals out, we can start removing the bearings. I heated up the screws here, and then I'm taking them out with an impact screwdriver just to make sure they don't strip, because if these ones stripped, it would really suck. And now that the screws are out, we can remove the retaining clips. The next thing you'll want to do is remove your dowel pin so you can lay your case flat on the work surface so you can hammer out the bearings easier without damaging the sealing surface on the case. We're going to start with our main bearing here. I used a 24mm socket, and you have to hit this guy pretty hard. It's in there pretty good usually. After we remove our main bearing, I forgot to take out the seal, so I'm going to take it out and then bang the bearing through this side as well. So this is your Tusk bearing removal kit here, and you'll take this works really good if you can't get to the other side of a bearing. So you'll find one of these that fits 17, so you can see it's too big for that inside diameter. So now I'm going to try 15, and you just want it to be just loose. And then what you do is you tighten this down, hold this with a wrench and tighten this down, and this bottom part will actually expand. And now you can see it can't fit in there because it's expanded, but if it was already in there, it would grasp onto the bearing. And then you tighten down your slide hammer onto it. Basically, you tighten your slide hammer into this, and then when the force of this heavy metal piece banging into the top of the slide hammer will pull that bearing out. Pretty good tool. You'll have to have one if you're doing a rebuild. Alright, so we now got all the bearings removed from this case and the seals. Alright, now we can start on this case. I'm going to remove these two bearing retainer clips here. After you remove the retainer clips, you might be able to just pop it over and push it out from the other side. These ones usually come out pretty easily. That's why they have the retainer clips. Now we can remove our main bearing from this case. I have this towel under it just to ensure that I don't damage the sealing surface. And I'll give it some protection to make sure it doesn't crack too. I removed the crank bearing from the other case. Also, when we were banging out the crank bearing, somehow this guy popped out. Alright, we're down to our very last bearing. Alright guys, well we got everything done here, and this video has come to a close. I'm really happy to get these things completely torn down. I appreciate you guys watching. The next step's going to be cleaning these things up and making them look new, and then we're going to rebuild this bottom end and the top end as well. So if you guys want to see that, definitely like and subscribe to support the channel, and we'll get those coming at you. Excited to get this bike back together and finish up the build series.